Don't you like how they applaud before we've even said anything brilliant? Welcome. Thank you for coming early. I so enjoy doing these pre-concert chats, and I really appreciate you taking the extra time to hear them. My name's Christa Wessel, and I'm the morning host at All Classical Portland. I assume you're all familiar with the radio station, 89.9 FM. Fantastic. I am so pleased, we had such a good time last night, to do this pre-concert chat today with our guest conductor, James Gaffigan. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't know exactly where to start because the concert last night was so spectacular. Let's get to the music in a minute. Let's talk about you. You've been now on this podium, we still haven't figured it out, 3 or 4 times. Coming back to conduct the Oregon Symphony. Let's say for the 4th time. That feels about right. You've got a lot of friends in this orchestra, so it's always like a homecoming for you.
Yeah, I have lots of friends in this orchestra dating back from even high school. Karen Miller, the principal bassoonist, and I went to high school together in New York City, and we sat next to each other because I'm an ex-bassoonist. And we had a lot of fun. We became good friends, and many other members. Jen Arnold is a great friend of mine. She's in the viola section. She was at my wedding, and very good friends of our family. And I even said yesterday, she was the only female invited to my bachelor party. That's how close we are. So she's great. And Adam Trussell, we went to school, the second bassoonist, in New England Conservatory in Boston. And Marilyn D'Oliveira, the cellist. We went to Rice University in Houston, Texas. And there are a bunch of other members, too, that I know. I mean, it's a big, long list.
Is it weird conducting friends like that?
No, it was weird to me when I was studying to conduct my colleagues and people my age. But in a way, they were all my teachers, because I trusted them the most. I mean, conducting is such a strange profession in that you can't go into a practice room alone and practice conducting. You need to have someone reacting to your gestures and to what you're doing and what you're saying. So I think my friends were all essential to my growth as a musician and as a conductor. So for me, it's just so nice to look into someone's eyes that I know and trust. You're American-born, but living in Lucerne, Switzerland, as the music director there in Switzerland. And you're also you have conducting posts in Germany and the Netherlands? Amsterdam, yeah. So, I mean, it's a different world, and I love living there. I love living in Switzerland, and I love coming back to the U.S. I come regularly to the Cleveland Orchestra, the L.A. Philharmonic, and here in Portland, and San Francisco, things like that. So I like coming back, but I also love to live very much in Lucerne. I love my orchestra in Lucerne, and I think we have a very special thing going on there.
You're going to LA next week. After Oregon, you're going to LA, right?
Yeah, this was nice because it's like a West Coast tour. It's last week was in Vancouver, and this week in Portland, next week LA. So I brought the whole family, which is really nice. It's difficult to travel with 2 kids, but very tiring. And but we balance fun and work very well as a family.
Do your kids get what you do for a living?
Well, one's only 8 months old, so he has no idea what's happening. But my daughter, she's 3.5. She sort of gets it, but she can't. She doesn't understand how to be quiet when she sees me rehearsing. She'll scream, "Daddy!" and it's not a good thing to have her around rehearsals. But she definitely loves music, and she loves the orchestra, and she gets what I do. She understands it.
Because not a lot of people do.
Yeah, you're telling me my father still doesn't have any idea what I'm doing, and he doesn't understand how I make money waving my arms in front of a bunch of people. But, I mean, most of my family, they're not musicians, and when I told my grandfather when he was still alive, I said, "Grandpa, I'm going to become a conductor." He said, "Of what train line?" And he was absolutely serious, and a bunch of people, when they come, my debut with Philadelphia Orchestra, my Uncle Joe, does that guy banging the triangle make the same amount of money that the guys playing the violin? It's a good question. I said, yeah, Uncle Joe, it's actually sometimes more. You know, I like coming from a family of non-musicians because there's no pressure, and they're happy when I'm happy, you know, and they love the music, but they don't know much about the music, but they were supportive, and both my mother and father were extremely supportive of me becoming a musician, which, you know, to any middle-class family seemed like a terrifying thing. Like, my son wants to be a musician, you know, great. What next? And so it worked out, and they've got to travel a lot to Europe, and I love visiting them in New York, and I have my debut with New York Philharmonic next year, and so that'll be really fun, because I think all of Staten Island is going to come. So it's fun. And there's no pressure from my family. I have enough pressure, I think.
Well, you mentioned you came from a family that didn't have a big musical background. How did you then come to music?
Well, we had a piano, and I always was interested in the piano, and I kind of learned harmony on my own in a way that I didn't learn from a textbook or from a teacher. I just realized, this sounds happy, this sounds sad, this is interesting, and so I learned how to build triads on my own. And I think because of that, I learned jazz music and jazz guitar. So I learned harmony in a very different way, a non-structured way, which I think was wonderful for my development, because I don't think of rules when it comes to classical music. I just hear harmonies as color and sound, and I don't necessarily think of those black notes on the page when I hear music. It just sounds like something to me. So I was happy to come from a jazz background, because it was a very free way of thinking.
We'll talk about harmonies and sounds. We got to talk about this Sibelius Symphony, because it is... Yeah, to think about it as notes on a page, I think is doing it disservice. You have to think about it as images and harmonies.
I think, you know, Sibelius has the most bizarre language, and I think he uses the notes that we see in Beethoven, in Dvorak, in Brahms, Stravinsky. He uses the same text, but in a much different way. It's like watching a foreign film without the translation, without the subtitles, you know, the surtitles. It's like you can feel what's going on, but the language is so different and so individual. I mean, you know it's Sibelius, right from, you know, 5 seconds of hearing it. And that's special. Not many composers can say that. This particular symphony is the darkest and the most out there symphony. So I figured Portland would be the perfect place to bring it to. But in the end, I've done it a lot, and I love it, and we always go through the same adventure with the musicians. The first rehearsal is shell shock. Everyone's looking around saying, what is this, you know, and why are we doing this? And then by the end, people coming to the dressing room saying, I'm so happy we're doing this piece. I'm falling in love with it, and I hated it when we first read it. And I love that adventure. I find the best things in life are things that you don't like at first, and you come to, like my wife. I couldn't stand her when I first met her. And it's a true story. And the more I spent time with her, the more I enjoyed her company and her sense of humor. And it was really strange. But I find that the pieces I loved the most right away, I can't stand anymore. Yeah, the pieces I used to love, for example, Tchaikovsky 5. It's a great symphony. It's wonderful, but I don't want to do it again. You know, I've done it so much. Actually, I am doing it again. I just thought of it, but you know, and things like the Moldau. It's so beautiful, and I've just done it so much, and I'd be happy not hearing it ever again. But Sibelius 4, it grows on me. All of the music of Sibelius grows on me. I think it was Toscanini that conducted it, the debut in New York, and the audience just was you know, like one guy clapping, and Toscanini said, we're playing it again. And they played the whole thing again. And, you know, the audience, maybe they just clapped because they wanted to get out of there, but they enjoyed it a lot better. I think this piece is an adventure. It's an exploration of a different world. And you have to take it that way. And the musicians here play it so well. We've worked so hard on this in such detail. And I think the finished product is pretty impressive.
Well, let's talk about what these harmonies that Sibelius uses, just the general feel. It is I don't want to say a difficult symphony. We've become so accustomed to thinking of Sibelius as Finlandia and patriotism and those big brass swells of emotion. There is none of that in this symphony. So how would you describe it?
He was studying the sounds in nature, and he was fascinated by the overtones of rapids. And the very opening is him trying to recreate the sound of sitting next to this rushing water. And it's very low. He uses the lowest part of the orchestra, the basses, cellos, and bassoons, to create this dissonance of sound. He also, I'm pretty certain that he's mimicking when a glacier calves an iceberg. You know, when a big piece of ice breaks off of a glacier, and the sound it makes, the crunching sound it makes, you can hear this in the brass and the opening, and it's quite extraordinary. And also, a sunrise. You can hear the sunrise in this music. You can see the first patch of green grass that you see after all of this winter and snow and ice. It's pretty extraordinary, and I think the silences, what makes the audience the most uncomfortable are the silences, and also when nothing is happening, when there's just one line being played, and people, they think, where is this going? You're not going anywhere. And I think that's what's beautiful about this music, enjoying the solitude and the peace of it. And then an event happens, and then again, back to nothingness. And I think the end of every single movement is resignation, it's giving up. And that's what makes this piece so depressing and so sad. There's a struggle in every movement, there's searching in every movement, and in the end is giving in. And the ending is the most shocking ending you'll ever hear from a big symphony, because it's like a street performer just packing up and saying, that's all, folks, there's nothing else to see, I'm done. And it's like someone giving up, completely giving in. In Sibelius's world, the end of life, there's nothing. And the reason I paired the Appalachian Spring at the end is to reward you, so we're not handing out razor blades to all the audience members, to reward you with possibility, because Copland, there's a lot of looking back and smiling through tears and remembering the past. There's also a lot of joyful music in the Copland, but the end is, again, it's teetering off. It's like the end of someone's life, looking back, but then there's possibility, there's hope. So Sibelius's world, no hope. Copland, hope for America, hope for music and tonality. And I love this dichotomy between the two pieces. I think it's a beautiful program.
I will say, as I was watching the concert, listening to the concert last night, there was a lot of, anxious kind of fidgeting around from the audience during the Sibelius. They didn't know what to make of it, you know?
It's normal.
And I enjoyed, during our chat yesterday, you encouraged the audience to say, you know, like, if your mind takes you in a certain place, just go there. Don't fight the music, just...
Don't fight the music. I think that's why children are such great listeners. They're completely open to what's happening. And I think you have to be open too. I don't make apologies for this piece. I'm not making excuses for this piece, but it's weird. There's no denying that it's a weird... It was written in 1911, and it's weirder than anything I've ever heard in my life, actually. But it's the language we know and love of music. It's in a very strange format.
And it's interesting to compare the Sibelius with Appalachian Spring. And they both have these kind of different wistful pastoral qualities. And one thing that leapt to mind for me last night, too, was the use of the glockenspiel, the bells. Yeah. In the last movement of the Sibelius, you hear these kind of cheerful-sounding bells in a not cheerful way.
Yeah, the whole symphony is based on this interval, the tritone. Not to get too complicated, but the basic harmony lesson is a major third, happy, minor third, sad, tritone, death. And, you know, the tritone was banned, at a certain point, and it's the most evil two notes you can put together. It creates the most dissonance. And the whole symphony is based on that and based around that. And the chaos in the last movement are two keys a tritone away from each other, fighting to win, to resolve in that key. And the glockenspiel, he's in the back trying to get the orchestra to help them with this ridiculously happy motive. Dun, 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 dun. It happens over and over again, and finally, it doesn't work. And that's what's so incredible. Whereas the Copland, it's pure beauty and like I said before, possibility and hope. In Sibelius, there's no hope. Sorry.
Aren't you looking forward to it? It's a magnificent symphony.
I love that. Someone in the audience, what you guys don't realize is we can hear you talk too. And there was this incredible moment where I was talking and explaining to the audience and how depressing it is. And, it's like watching a sad film. It's like cathartic. I mean, how do you explain it? We all need a bit of depression in our lives to realize how good our lives are. And I said all this stuff about the symphony. Said, why are we playing it then, And I think life is about context. You'll enjoy the Appalachian Spring that much more because of hearing the Sibelius. And I love that. I think it's a journey, and this is a mini journey we're taking this afternoon. But it's incredible, and I believe in context. I believe in different pieces of music being next to each other for those reasons. And the ending too. I love to hear the audience's reaction to the ending. A guy in the front row, we ended. It was silence, 10 seconds of silence, and then this guy in the first row says, "Oh." And that's the point. That is really the point. He got it. So I was very happy to hear the guy go, "Huh."
Yeah. So the Sibelius is the whole first half of the program. There's no frothy overture or everything. We get right into the meat of that Sibelius. Then we have intermission. And then the second half is comprised of two American composers with vastly different sounds. I mean, we mentioned Appalachian Spring. That seems to have become the definition of the American orchestral sound, what Copland does.
Yeah. I mean, McDowell is a romantic composer. You would never know it's American. I mean, if you heard it on the radio, you would think some of it sounds like Brahms, like Liszt, like Dvorak. I mean, I think in the end, he's a great composer that many people don't know about. But other American composers benefited from what he wrote. I think Copland, for whatever reason, has become the American composer. I think he's a great composer, but he's probably the only one that established this sound. Or Harris too, actually, but Copland. We think of American music when we hear Copland. There's no denying that these open harmonies, it's Americana, as you said yesterday, and I think that's wonderful, and I celebrate his music. I think it's incredible.
And this McDowell concerto, I mean, Edward McDowell was born in America, spent some time in Europe, so it makes sense that he got quite a dose of European influence. He was friendly with Liszt. I think he absorbed all that and brought it back to America. And you mentioned Tchaikovsky 5. I think the McDowell Concerto was performed on the same program as Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, and it makes a lot of sense to me. There's some Russian elements in that McDowell Concerto. And I have never heard that concerto played better than I did last night with Andre Watts. Holy cow.
Andre is... Not only is he a legend, but he's one of the most incredible people to work with. I said a little bit yesterday about this, but he understands the art of performing with an orchestra is something you can't teach somebody. And I think a lot of soloists are very high level technically, but they don't necessarily get the give and take between a large orchestra and themselves, the chamber music aspect of it. Andre has been doing this for so long and has worked with the best people who have ever lived, best musicians, and he's just a product of great music. And every time I work with him, whether it's the Grieg Piano Concerto, Brahms, or a new piece to me like this, it's just completely internalized and it's contagious. Every orchestra loves Andre, and it's contagious. His music making is contagious.
And last night after the concert, I was being such a groupie, and I was standing on the street back here talking to some of the musicians as they came out of the hall. A number of them said to me, I wish we played this McDowell Concerto more often. As you mentioned, you kind of sometimes get tired of the Tchaikovsky symphonies and such. It's a nice, refreshing, familiar sound, though, this McDowell Concerto.
It's a familiar language, and it's new, which is great. It's like playing a new Mozart symphony that the orchestra hasn't done in a while. That's really exciting, and it's fun, and it's it keeps people on their toes. You know, they're excited about it.
And speaking of which, in your program book, going back to the Sibelius for just 1 second, there's a line of data there that was interesting to me regarding the Sibelius Symphony. The last time it was played by the Oregon Symphony Orchestra, what does that say, 1949? 48 or 49? It says something.
People are still upset about it.
One more quick connection I want to make between Edward McDowell. Just a quick show of hands. Has anybody heard of Edward McDowell before? Yeah, he was a huge name during his day, but somehow, sadly, largely forgotten. One of the things that he's most remembered for is that he and his wife began an artist colony in New Hampshire. I think there's something like 30 or 40 little cottages that artists can apply for long residencies to work. Thornton Wilder wrote Our Town at the McDowell Colony. Leonard Bernstein wrote his Mass. And Aaron Copland wrote part of Appalachian Spring at the McDowell Colony, which I think ties that second half together pretty nicely, too.
That's why I built the program around it, you know. No, I had no idea. And that's a beautiful connection. I love that. And I think this is actually a really well-balanced program. I think it's great.
Before I let you go, you meant... Was that? Oh, would you have any questions for James Gaffigan? Oh, I have a couple. Okay. I was going to ask you about playing bassoon, but that's...
Oh, bassoon.
That's interesting. Yes, go ahead.
I know that the Lutheran Symphony plays at the KKL, which I think is probably my favorite venue in the world for its acoustics. I just wondered what you thought. That's your home
Yes,
base,
exactly.
right?
That's our home.
Talk about that place.
I'm very spoiled that the two concert halls I perform in most are the KKL in Lucerne, which is, in my opinion, not just because I work there, but in my opinion, the best modern hall built in the last 2 decades. It's incredible. And then the Concertgebouw, which is one of the best old halls in the world. So I'm very spoiled. We love working there. The acoustic in there is ideal, and they could also adjust it for extremely large orchestras and a chamber orchestra or a solo pianist by adjusting acoustic panels in the ceiling and also on the walls. But it's an intimate enough place where you still feel close to the audience, and it's modern, but it has a warmth to it, and that's rare because I find most modern halls are very icy, and you feel a bit strange walking into them. But there's something very warm about our acoustic. Yeah.
Yes, when you were talking about Sibelius, I've lived in Finland, and everything you were saying about Sibelius is Finland. Right. The Finnish language is a very strange language. When you first encounter Finland, and anybody I've ever met who lived in Finland thinks it's a very strange place, but within a few months, everyone says, this is the best place in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the openness, and the Finnish people I know have the strangest, darkest sense of humor ever. And yeah, at first you don't know whether to laugh or be creeped out by that person, but in the end, they're beautiful, warm people and honest people. And I think the openness of the landscape, you'll recognize it right away, and it's pretty extraordinary how he mimics that in sound, in the sound world.
The Finnish conductor Hannu Lintu, who's been here several times, told a story about how the Finnish people, when they're engaged in a conversation, when they're done, they'll just say, okay, goodbye, and walk away, rather than the American way of saying, oh, it's been so nice seeing you. When will I see you again? Oh, I just really enjoyed our conversation. You know, we make a big deal of the end.
You say, how are you? Do I know you? That's typical.
Okay. Did I see another hand go up? Way over here. Oh, you're going to make me run.
If we don't, as an audience, respond appropriately after the Sibelius, will you play it again?
I would, but I think the orchestra would go into overtime, and it would come out of my salary. And I know. I think if it was a short piece, I like to do that. If it's a 4-minute long piece that's wacky. Sometimes a second hearing is really important. But in this case, with our time limitation, no. But you can do whatever you want. The more cheering or booing, it's exciting for me. So But I think, yeah, I think honesty is very important. You shouldn't pretend. Yeah.
Was there another question? Did I see a hand go up? Okay.
On that note, are you very definitely constrained by time? I understand you have a contract.
Yeah, basically the time for orchestras, they're very strict. The unions have been very strict with time because I think a lot of conductors in the past took advantage of the musicians. For example, they would keep them an hour over when the rehearsal should end. So there are all these rules in the contract about when you have to break, how long the orchestra could be on stage. And I think it all revolves around the longest symphony, which is probably Mahler 3 or something. And I think it can't be longer than a certain period of time that the concertmaster exits the stage, because the musicians have in their contract that they're paid overtime. And they would love it, but the people upstairs in the administration would be very upset by it. But yeah, there are general rules about that.
Oh, I see a hand. Okay, good.
I just wondered about this program. Does Andre Watts say he'll play this and you build around
That's
that?
a great question. She's wondering about the program and how it was built. In my experience, the way it works is 2 years in advance, you get an invitation to an orchestra. You agree or you don't agree to come. And they say, this is the soloist. And in this case, it was Andre Watts is going to be your soloist. Do you agree to that? I said, of course, I agree to that. And what does he want to play? He said he'd really like to do the MacDowell. And I said, interesting. I've never done the MacDowell Second Piano Concerto, and I'll do it. And then based around that piece, then we build the program. So there are a lot of things that went into, and I'll be completely honest with you because why not? I think the things that go into program is box office, the name of the soloist, and repertoire. So in this case, we had Andre Watts. We know people are coming. He could be risky by doing a piece nobody knows because he's Andre Watts. Then I said, well, we've got Andre Watts coming. People are coming to the concert. Let's do Sibelius 4. And then the artistic administrator, who's brilliant, said to me, okay, James, if we do Sibelius 4, we've got to reward. I said, I completely agree. So let's give them something really popular at the end where they can go home happy and go home smiling. And this all goes into it. So we decided Appalachian Spring for me, for many reasons, for musical reasons. They balance each other extremely well. And I think it works as a perfect program, and I'm really happy with it, especially with the way it went last night. It was very successful, and like I said, it's a journey beginning to end. So I think that's normally what goes into it. And sometimes I had a couple of ideas first. They said, no, Carlos wants to do that piece next year, or he's done it last year. So there are all these conversations that happen. It was like a 2-week process of coming up with this program. And in the end, we're both very happy with it.
It works really well. If you have friends you think might enjoy this pre-concert conversation, it has been videotaped and will be accessible on the All Classical Portland website later on today. Is that right, Joe? Later on today at allclassical.org. And I have one final self-serving question to ask you. I did this yesterday, and it was really illuminating for me. As an announcer at All Classical Portland, we play Appalachian Spring pretty regularly. Every time I say Appalachian, I get complaints. Then I switch to Appalachian, and I get complaints. How many prefer Appalachian? God, Appalachian? So I lived in North Carolina for 15 years, and nobody said Appalachian. So Appalachian, yeah. But you all prefer Appalachian, so I'm going to have to reconsider my whole... Okay. Sorry. That has nothing to do with this man sitting here. It's completely self-serving. I appreciate your indulgence. James Gaffigan, thank you for coming and doing this with me.
That's my pleasure. Thank you very much.